10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Christmas edition of the Right Fit podcast. I'm Darryl Jacobs, your host, ESPN Network College Basketball Analyst and Executive Director of Rising Coaches DEI Alliance. Join me every Friday with guests from Collegiate Athletics and professional sports who are the decision makers when it comes to the hiring process. Joining me on this Christmas Eve podcast is a dear friend and Director of Athletics at Felician University, Ben DiNallo Jr. Ben, thank you for taking the time on this Christmas Eve, buddy, to entertain me on this podcast.
Entertain, Coach. Coach Jacobs, it is a pleasure, and it's wonderful to be with you, and it was great seeing you at Felician last week. Always a pleasure to be in your company, my friend.
Well, thank you, man. It's always good to come back to a place where it all started at, and we'll get a little bit into our history over 20 years as well, and to see one of my former players who's the head coach there break my career record, and now he's the all-time winningest coach there at Felician. So I'm very proud to have been part of that tradition as well. But before we get started with the Q&A, talk a little bit about your journey into collegiate athletics and why, Ben.
I have to tell you, it was a strange one because I really wasn't thinking that college athletics was going to be my career. I really thought it was going to be high school coaching and teaching, and I was working at some local high schools for about 8 or 9 years. Was at Immaculate Heart Academy of Holy Angels, and I was the head girls basketball coach at Emerson High School for a year. And I was at a clinic. I was at an NJSIA clinic that Rose Battaglia and George Blaney, true story, were both speaking at. It was at Sea Caucus. It was at one of the hotels in Sea Caucus. And that night, I met a guy named Bert Antoine. And Bert Antoine was the first women's basketball coach at Felician University, Felician College then. And we had known each other a little bit. He coached soccer at Paramus Catholic, and we coached against one another. But we were chatting this night, and he had told me about his getting hired at Felician. And one thing led to another, and then we started talking about me being one of his assistants. And as luck would have it, Felician started athletics in 1996. They had 4 sports, and on the women's side, they had women's basketball and softball. The softball coach at the time was a gentleman named Nick Valdez, who I also knew very well. And once I got in with Bert as his assistant, I got in contact with Nick, and he asked me to be his assistant on the softball side. And as they say, the rest is history. And it's 26 years this year. Proud to say I'm the last person from the original Felician University athletic department staff, and it's been a wonderful ride and a lot of changes. And it was great having you be a part of that for a while. You were one of our most successful coaches, and obviously you've gone on and done some great things. But Felician is a special place, and proud to call it my home for a long time.
Well, thank you. And I'll get into a little bit about our history. You just talked about, me being at Felician actually from 2000 to 2005. And we'll talk about the transition from NEIA to NCAA2, which is very important, determining this podcast, which is the right fit for those who are looking to get into collegiate athletics. Ben, elaborate a little bit about athletics at a small college setting, particularly at the NCAA Division II level. I've had a lot of guests on that with Division I athletic directors, even search firms. But the reason why I want to bring you on also was to talk a little bit about the NCAA Division II and how the athletics are there, particularly at a small college or university like Felician.
Well, I think that anyone who's going to get into college athletics at the small college setting has to be prepared to roll up their sleeves and do a lot of different things. An athletic director at Felician is not the same as an athletic director, as you mentioned, at a Division I school, whether it's large or small. I've swept floors, I've set up chairs, I've done PA, I've done it all as athletic director, and you kind of have to do those things because you don't have the elaborate budgets that other schools have. One of the things that I am proud of is over the last 5 years, though, we've made some significant improvements from a staffing perspective to try to really get ourselves situated to really advance the program. And I think that it's important that young people know that they're going to wear different hats. Even though they may think of themselves as a coach, they're going to be a fundraiser. They're going to be someone who might get into facilities or event management or those types of things that make the athletic department run and really run effectively.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things, of course, you mentioned me being at Felician, and we swept a lot of floors together. Actually, before you became the athletic director as well, we were coaching colleagues, as well. And we watched Bob Simmons. Shout out to Bob Simmons, the first athletic director at Felician College, who gave me the opportunity as well. We watched how he navigated and was part of the process of helping him as well. Let's talk a little bit about what goes on at Felician University. Talk a little bit about how does the recruiting process or the hiring process look at Felician University, particularly, as you mentioned, at a small Division II school with limited budget.
Well, first of all, from the recruiting side, we really try to do a good job of recruiting the tri-state area for all of our sports. I think if you look at some of our most successful sports, I think they've done a really good job, most notably our baseball team, who have been nationally ranked, have won CACC championships. Their roster is comprised of a lot of good New Jersey talent statewide. And again, you mentioned Ivan Lewis as our head men's basketball coach. His roster is littered with quality New Jersey student athletes. But I also think that we do a good job of recruiting internationally. We've always had a really good relationship with our Office of International Programs. And Ivan was fortunate enough to have a student athlete this year come from Ireland. Sean McCarthy's done a great job for him as a freshman. And I think there are a lot of our programs that have started to kind of test those waters, so to speak. And it's important to really have some diversity. If you look at some of our other programs, we have student athletes from the West Coast, kids that want to be in a small college environment. But one of the other things that we sell is we sell New York City. We sell the tri-state area. A lot of people from outside of this area want to be here. Obviously, it's New York's greatest city in the world, and there's so many opportunities professionally that they can make really solid contacts, get some good career internships. We sell all of that from a recruiting standpoint, and I think we're successful. Now, we're not the only school, obviously, that does that. So we've got to try to still be different. And the biggest thing that can separate us from some of our colleague schools really are the relationships that coaches make. And I think that that's something that is so important. Not only is a coach selling Felician, but they're selling themselves, and they're selling their program and what they can do for that student athlete and the right experience that they can provide. All of those things make the recruiting process important. And obviously the degree, we can't forget obviously about the degree that they're going to earn. Felician has really made a lot of strides in the last 10, 15 years to really upgrade their course offerings and their major offerings. Obviously, Felician was an all-female institution until 1987. A lot more offerings that are geared towards male student athletes and male students. When you wrap all that in a bow, it really is it's a great place, and I think we work hard from a recruiting standpoint to try to get the right fit, the right kids to come to our institution.
I like you mentioning the right fit, henceforth the podcast as well. Talk about it from the administrative end within your athletic department. You, of course, been the athletic director for the past 19 years. Talk about the hiring process when it comes to that, and talk about some of the opportunities that became available now as opposed to back 19 years ago.
Well, you mentioned, and it's, I kind of did it by accident, but, Mark Mentone, our sports information director, always talks about this when we're in a search for a position, about my saying that we need the right fit. We've interviewed a lot of men and women for different positions at Felician who were really qualified, but they may not have been the right fit. And it's important to be that, because you have to understand where you're going to be working, and you can't have expectations that are going to be higher than what we're going to be able to achieve and what we're going to be able to do. Now, that doesn't mean that our standards are very low and we don't want to raise the bar, but we all have to be on the same page. And it does make it important for the search committee and for me as the athletic director to try to find the right fit for that position. Now, one of the things that we've done over the last 10 or 15 years is to try to couple positions so that we can make people full-time in various roles. One of the most recent ones, Brendan Bonnicum, is our head men's and women's lacrosse coach, and he was an assistant athletic director. Chris Langen has been a recruiting coordinator for us and our head baseball coach. We're also, I'm really proud to say that I have hired Steve Fagan and Ivan Lewis as men's and women's basketball coach, now with no other responsibilities. Ivan, once upon a time, was our facilities manager, and Steve was our internal operations coordinator. They've been replaced now with other people, and that strengthens our athletic department to have people that are in roles that are just geared towards either coaching or towards the benefit of the athletic department. So a lot has changed from that standpoint. But again, I go back to what I said initially. Young people that are going to get into athletics administration or coaching, they better be ready to wear a lot of hats and be prepared to do a lot of things. And one other thing, D, that I tell a lot of young people that I interview, if you're going to get into college administration or college sports, don't be afraid to relocate. You want to be able to go where the really good job is. And if you just want to be in one specific location, this may not be the right fit for you. I'm a dinosaur being at one place for such a long period of time. Most people don't stay in jobs more than 8 or 10 years, and then they're moving on. Even 8 years might be long. People want to, especially in the coaching world, they want to do well and they want to move to a better situation. Maybe they want to go from D3 to D2, and then obviously on from D2 to D1. So I do think that young coaches and young athletic administrators have to be ready to relocate.
Well, that's good. And I'm glad you mentioned about right fit. A lot of times when me being part of the executive director of Rise and Coach DEI Alliance, as I tell the coaches when they're interviewing, if you don't get the job, you may think you a great fit and definitely qualify for the job, but you may not be the right fit for that particular institution. So it's not a disparity on your qualifications. You just was not the right fit. And I think today, a lot of the coaches and administrators are beginning to realize that as well. Talk about some of the do's and don'ts with your experience as far as interviewing for a particular position, whether it's a head coaching position at Felician University or administrative position at Felician University.
Well, I think you have to balance how well you promote yourself in the interview. I think you want to, you walk a fine line with a specific interviewer as to how much of a self-promoter you're going to be. Sometimes you need to let your experience do the work. Someone's going to look at your resume and you're going to have a lot of qualifications, and that's going to really drive the bus, so to speak, in the process. And you can be at ease and talk about your experience. Now, when you're just starting out, obviously you don't have that experience. So now, the shoe's on the other foot, so to speak. You have to sell yourself, and you have to really do it in a way that's going to be received well by the person on the other side. You have to walk that fine line where you don't want to be, braggadocious, but you have to really be able to sell yourself and what you're going to be able to do for that college or university. I think that's sometimes a hard thing for young professionals to understand. I have to tell you, I've been in interviews where I've been blown away by candidates where where it was just, you knew that it was a good fit because it was just conversational. You were just talking. And then there have been interviews that I've been in that after the first question, I was done. I literally was done. Right. I had, you just knew that this wasn't going anywhere. And it felt bad that was the case. And, I did turn out to be right in that situation, and you feel bad about it. But, after you do it for a while, when you're talking with someone, if that person is going to be the right fit for whatever job you're interviewing for.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've been part of committees as well in the interviewing process. After the first answer, you knew this person may not be the right fit. And unfortunately, when I tell a lot of young administrators of coaches, your elevator pitch, as I tell them, has to be spot on to engage and keep their interest. And you got to cover a full gamut of letting them know, the university, the college, the ins and outs, you've done your research as well. And that keeps them engaged. But if you don't do that, you have lost them. And from there, it's just a formality of just getting through the interview process. JR, talk a little bit about the trends compared to when we were back at Felician College in the early 2000s, transitioning from NAIA to NCAA. Talk about some of the trends now that some of the young administrators, even the coaches, would need to be abreast of in order to navigate in this business.
Well, I think the first thing, and I don't have my master's degree, and I would say to any young professional, be educated. That clearly will open a lot of doors and will give you a major leg up if you are educated. Don't look past that, and also don't think that it's beneath you to take a graduate assistant position so that you can get your master's degree paid for. Take advantage of all those opportunities. I think that's priority number one. Is anyone, whether they're going to be a coach or an administrator, but they need to be educated. The second thing is, I think people need to figure out the path that they want to go, whether it is coaching or whether it is administration. I think back, 15, 20 years ago, there were a lot of people like myself and other ADs in the Central Atlantic Collegiate Conference that wore both hats. You see less and less of that now. People eventually move into administrative positions after that they've coached, but it's a rarity now. I think you need to, early on in your career, figure out your path. Do you want to be an administrator? Do you want to be a coach? And if you want to be an administrator, figure out what you want to do. The other thing that I tell a lot of people, and this, initially they really don't like hearing it, get yourself involved in compliance and be good at it, because that's a big ticket as well. The other one, in terms of being a really good administrator, is a path that I'm about to embark on: fundraising. Clearly, every institution is driven, and we hate to think of it this way, but it's driven by money. Institutions need to raise money. If you're a good fundraiser, you're going to be able to be a good administrator and be able to have a good career. There's so many opportunities in the athletic development role at whether they be small or large institutions. But I don't want to not really focus on the compliance aspect. People look at that as a job nobody wants to do. It's important, and it gives you a really big breadth of knowledge with regards to rules, bylaws, and everything related to either the NCAA or the NAIA. I think that's a good start and a good path for young professionals who want to be college administrators.
Very good advice. Make sure you go beyond the bachelor degree, because that's just like having a high school diploma today. And you want to keep yourself qualified. The master was able to do that, at least get you into consideration from there. And you mentioned two areas that's very important that I know very well, as well. Compliance, being a former college head coach, one of the things I pride myself with is in compliance, and of course fundraising. And a lot of coaches don't realize it. You're going to have to master those anyway as coaches, because if you are at an institution that basketball is the front porch to the university, you are the face of the university. So part of what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to fundraise. Particularly, when I was at Felician, fundraising was foremost one of the things we had to do as well. Ben, let's take a commercial break, and I want to come back and talk a little bit about the hiring process for coaches, since this is the right fit, brought to you by Rising Coaches. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into some other things as well. You're watching The Right Fit with your host, Darryl Jacobs.
The Right Fit podcast is brought to you by Rising Coaches Search and Consulting. Tired of spending what seems like all of your time and budget filling coaching vacancies? Let Rising Coaches Search and Consulting handle your next coaching search. Our process is simple. We identify, vet, and recruit a talented and diverse group of professionals that fits your institution's profile. all for a low price that we guarantee will beat our competitions. Plus, all of your searches will be handled by former coaches, meaning we will get the best possible insight on all of your candidates, and you'll get the perspective that only a former coach could provide. For testimonials, a full client list, or more information, please visit risingcoaches.com.
Welcome back to the Right Fit Podcast, Christmas Eve edition. I'm here with my dear friend, Ben DiNallo, Jr., Director of Athletics at Felician University, an NCAA Division II school located in Rutherford and Lodi, New Jersey as well, and a member of the CACC, Central Athletic Collegiate Conference, that I know pretty well. And we're talking about the hiring process, both from the administrative side as well as the coaching side. And let me segue into the coaching side and talk a little bit about that. Of course, you have hired, a few coaches, since I left, as well back in 2005. I think there's been 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 after I left, which speaks to the longevity of you making the right choice for coaches. But talk about the hiring process when it comes to hiring coaches, regardless of the sport, and some of the things you look for, particularly at an NCAA Division II school such as Felician that has those limited resources.
Well, I think the first thing, what is it, a full or part-time job? We still have part-time head coaches at Felician. We're really trying as best we can to do to move on from that, but we're still there. One of the first things that I like to identify, does this person have head coaching experience? That doesn't rule out for me someone who doesn't, an assistant coach, because obviously, you mentioned the three coaches that we hired as men's basketball coaches that followed you. The first one was a former assistant of yours, Del Harrison. So I mean, it doesn't exclude anyone. But if I had my druthers going into a process, I would love to hire someone that does have head coaching experience, particularly at the collegiate level, because, it's not just what a person knows in terms of the X's and O's of the strategies of that particular sport. They have to be able to recruit. They have to be able to sell the program and sell themselves and the creation of a program, all of those things that you get when you're a head coach. So that's the first thing. I definitely would love to have someone who has head coaching experience. The other thing is I am somewhat partial for people that are from this area because they know a lot of people in this area, obviously. And regardless of the sport, you want to have someone who's going to be able to have existing relationships with high school coaches, with AAU or club coaches, whatever, regardless of the sport. Not having that, again, doesn't exclude someone, but it does make it easier for that person to come in and really hit the ground running. And, at a place like ours, they have to be able to recruit. They have to be able to bring in quality student athletes, and they have to be able to do it immediately. We've said for years, the quickest way to go from bottom to middle to top is one or two good recruiting classes, and you can make a difference immediately. So having those existing relationships are so very important, and really one of the biggest things that I'm looking for. The last thing is when I'm actually in the interview process. Now I am actually talking some technical things about a particular sport. And I'm a sports junkie. I like all sports, and I think I can talk a lot about a variety of sports. So I don't mind having conversations where I'll ask you, all right, Darryl, 20 seconds left in the game, you're down 3. Do you shoot the 3 right away, or do you get a quick 2? And I want to ask, and I want to see what that person is going to say to me in that situation. Not because there's a right or a wrong answer, but I want an answer. I want there to be a philosophy that this person has, because then I know that they're thinking the game a little bit. And again, I can do that all day, but I want that person to be comfortable and tell me those things. And I can do it in different sports. We can talk about it in baseball, in anything. So I think those are the things that I do in the interview process.
Well, listen, I'm definitely going for the quick 2.
Yeah, I hear
And then
you.
we're going to foul right away. We're going to play the foul game, and we're going to attack the basket. We're not going to jack up threes, unless it's the last second and a two can't help us.
Okay.
As well. That was strategy. Hopefully,
There you go.
hopefully Ivan learned all that as well. But talk about some of the attributes. Some of the things you talked about when hiring a head coach is recruiting and relationships. But there's more to a coach when they come to an institution. Some of the things they're going to have to come. What type of skills they may have to come with? You mentioned fundraising, which is important. You've mentioned being community oriented. Talk about some of the other things that they must possess.
Honestly, I think that I've been blessed with this skill. I think one of the biggest, and I have to tell you to all of our listeners, you were blessed with this skill as well. You have to know how to navigate in the community that you're in. And you know what? Felician was different than Delaware. Delaware was different than Queens. Queens was different than Virginia State, than Clark. You had to navigate. I mean, I just mentioned, I don't even talk about Lehman. So you had a whole different types of schools that you had to navigate, but you learn. And you learn how you have to do it, who you have to make the connections with. And through all of this, I think that's arguably the biggest skill that any one person can have, is the ability to make quality relationships. And you did that at Felician with not only people in athletics, but people in academics, people in financial aid, people in admissions. You have to be able, the dining hall, like you have to, residence life, you have to be able to have friends and quality relationships in all of those departments, because at some point in time, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to need those people, and they're going to need to know that you're not just in it where it's, you're looking for something, but you really care about that person. You care about what they do, and that makes the relationship better. All of those things make being in one situation huge. And sometimes people don't learn those skills, and they think, I'm the men's basketball coach, somebody's going to do these things for me. And that is not true. And you learn the hard way when you have that mindset. Relationship building is so crucial.
Well, I'm glad I had great mentors that I came up under and coached under. And it's Tom Barise, who, of course, at the time when I was coaching with him at Ramapo College, was a scout for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, he's in the Mike Fratello, Hebe Brown tree. So I was very fortunate to get with someone who taught me all those things as well. And I often say this, Ben, and I say this to coaches all the time: a campus wins championships, meaning that you have to build those internal relationships, not just external, but you have to build those relationships with the internal constituents, and also volunteer when they need you as well. And if they need you for anything, building those type relationships. And I just wanted to add that as well. Let's talk about change. One of the things people hate to hear is change. And some people are certain a certain way. Let's talk about some of the changes you're seeing now in the industry compared to maybe, let's say, 10 years ago, in regards to that the person that's looking to get into the field may need to know, whether it's administrative or even from a coaching standpoint.
Well, I think you have to always be current. I think you have to understand, how to go into a student athlete's home and talk to their parents and talk to any family members, as well as talking to that student athlete. I think this better than anybody. You have to recruit the family as well as recruiting the student athlete. I think that's a huge thing for young coaches to understand, is that they always need to be current, and not just current in terms of X's and O's, but current in terms of what's out there in the world today. I saw a great interview with Doris Burke yesterday, and she talked about from people that were going to be broadcasters or announcers. And she said, it's not enough just to know about the game that you're going to be announcing, but you need to know about art. You need to know about music. You need to know about movies. You need to know about everything, because that makes you well-rounded. And I think, quite frankly, sometimes young people, they get pigeonholed into the sport that they love, and they don't broaden their horizons. And I think that that's something that really gets lost sometimes. And as I was listening to her, and I think she's terrific, but as I'm listening to her, it's so simple, but it makes so much sense. It makes you so much more of a better listen as an announcer if you're able to drop little nuggets about a variety of different things. Well, it also will make you a much better coach if you can sit in a living room with mom and dad and the student athlete and be able to talk about any subject that they would want, because at the end of the day, that family has to trust you because they're sending their son or daughter off to college and you're going to be their mentor. And it's not just about basketball or whatever sport they're going to play. It's about the experience. And at the end of the day, even if it's a major D1 where that young man or woman is going to play professionally in whatever sport, get the degree. Mom and dad want to hear about all the great things that you're going to do and the places that you're going to go and the winning championships, but they also want to hear about the degree. And that's got to always be the message. Sometimes I think coaches get away from those things, but I think being current and being diverse is a huge attribute to be able to have today.
Well, Doris Burke, who's a friend of mine, is tremendous. I mean, she's such one of the best in the game. I think she's one of the best to ever do it, actually. And we've been around for a long time in regards to being well-rounded as well. I've been told I'm very rounded. I've been told I have the gift for gab, so to speak. But also, you have to have that as a coach, as well. And being a broadcaster with ESPN now, being knowledgeable of a variety of things, even with my young play-by-play guys, I'll mention something. They'd be like, wow, what is that? Then I have to tell them about the history. Then I can come all the way up to current,
right,
with some phrases as well. And, and just for any coach out there, I never recruited the player first. I already recruited the family first. If I win the family, I'm going to get the player. Just some information.
Absolutely.
For you to know as well. JR, thank you for joining me this afternoon, taking time out on Christmas Eve, my friend, to entertain me, as I say, as well. And I want to tell the viewers as well as the listeners, as of December 31st, correct me if I'm wrong, you will no longer be the athletic director at Felician University, having served 19 years in that capacity. You're 26 at the university, and I'll let you tell them the role you'll be going into.
Well, you're right. I am moving on. I'm not leaving Felician, but I am moving into a different role. I'm going to become the Senior Athletics Development Officer at Felician. I'm going to be a fundraiser, as we talked about a little bit earlier today. And I just had a great conversation with President Crawford at Felician. And I want to be, and these were his words, I'm an ambassador for Felician. I've always viewed myself that way, but now I'm really going to be in that role. And I think I have a good skill set to create some good partnerships that can really position Felician in a good spot moving forward. My assistant for the last 7 years, Andrew Torriello, is going to step into the athletic director role on an interim basis, and I'm hopeful that he will become the full-time AD at Felician. He's more than qualified, and he's more than capable and ready to move Felician to where it needs to go, both in the CACC and nationally at the Division II level. And lastly, I'm excited. I'm going to be returning to coaching golf. It's a big passion of mine. Golf is a big thing in my family. One of the earliest memories of relationships with my dad and my grandfather are on the golf course. So I'm thrilled to be back doing that again. And when time permits, I dig what you do, Coach Jacobs. I do some broadcast work on the side. So whenever you need somebody, you need a wingman, brother, I'm always available.
Well, maybe we can do a podcast talking about sports, because, a lot of people don't know your background. When I was there at Felician, we talked sports immensely before you became the AD on those road trips, and love to hear your knowledge, and you're fantastic at it. And I'm surprised nobody has scooped you up yet to do that part of it as well. But Ben, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I want to thank the viewers and listeners for tuning in. Join me next Friday, New Year's Eve, for another great guest here on the Right Fit Podcast. Until then, I'm Darryl Jacobs. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and Merry Christmas.
The Right Fit Podcast is brought to you by Rising Coaches Search and Consulting. Tired of spending what seems like all of your time and budget filling coaching vacancies? Let Rising Coaches Search and Consulting handle your next coaching search. Our process is simple. We identify, vet, and recruit a talented and diverse group of professionals that fits your institution's profile, all for a low price that we guarantee will beat our competitions. Plus, all of your searches will be handled by former coaches, meaning we will get the best possible insight on all of your candidates, and you'll get the perspective that only a former coach could provide. For testimonials, a full client list, or more information, please visit risingcoaches.com.